Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Dynasty After Dark. I'm your host, Calvin Timms, and you can find me over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't have too many other social medias, but welcome into another episode of the podcast, continuing with our fantasy impact series that we've been doing here, going division by division through the NFL, recapping the NFL draft a little bit for a total team perspective and an off-season kind of recap as well, going through all the changes for the teams and the fantasy impacts that I can kind of see for some of the players because of that. Now, if you're new, so far I've covered the NFC and AFC North in the first couple podcasts, and I also did the AFC East last week, or just the other day, just the last episode. So yeah, love to get started here on the NFC East, and man, it's been a long week. Thank you guys so much for joining me and understanding. I had the internet issues, cut my internet cable last weekend when I was doing some landscaping. It is not as easy as you think to avoid all those cables. That's probably why they tell you to call before you dig. But yeah, I was an idiot and didn't do that. So cut my internet cable, didn't get it back until Tuesday. Got you guys a podcast as quickly as I could. But yesterday I was just beat. I've been dead tired. This week has just been so long. So yeah, thank you guys for joining. In terms of news, there hasn't been too much. They are talking about potentially a Deshaun Watson suspension coming down here in the next couple of days. So we will find out about that soon. But as of right now, we are still waiting for that. So that said, I'm just going to jump right into the NFC East here and starting with the Washington Commanders. So biggest thing that they did this offseason, one of the most controversial pieces of it would be the Carson Wentz trade. They traded, I think, 2/3 for Carson Wentz. He was the first quarterback that moved this offseason, and one of the craziest offseasons we've probably ever seen for fantasy football, real football. It was just nuts. Carson Wentz comes over to the Commanders. I personally like it, and I know it's easy to hate on Carson Wentz. He does a lot of dumb stuff at bad times, like really bad times. But it's just always ironic to me to see the people that are super down on Carson Wentz and also super high on Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, Carson Wentz is a better version of Jimmy Garoppolo. He's a more talented version of Jimmy Garoppolo. They both do dumb turnovers at the worst possible time. One of them just had Kyle Shanahan for 3 years to kind of mask his imperfections, while Carson Wentz did not. So, yeah, I think Carson Wentz with the Commanders and Ron Rivera is a very good combination. I think it's going to be very beneficial for fantasy. And again, if you look back at last year for the Indianapolis Colts and Carson Wentz, it just wasn't a good fit. I know that the coaching staff was the coaching staff from Philadelphia, Frank Reich and those guys. But in reality, the Colts, while having a very good offensive line, didn't have a very good offensive line most of the season last year. They were like bottom 15, I think, in offensive line rankings by PFF's metrics for most of the season last year. Their offensive weapons are, outside of Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman, non-existent. They don't have tight ends. Their tight ends are just non-existent. They're garbage. They're straight up garbage. Indy's weapons are garbage other than Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor. So he really didn't have that much to work with, man. Like, I understand. Like I said, it's easy to hate on Carson Wentz, but he's coming into the Washington Commanders. Very good offensive line. You can see here on our lads, that's what I've been using for all these breakdowns. No changes on the offensive line this year. So they are running it back. They had a fairly decent offensive line last year, and it's just going to be getting better. So, as they get a little bit more experience, because I think they had 2 rookies last year, or 2 new players to the roster last year. So a second year with this system, I think it's just going to be better for him. And if you remember, Taylor Heineke was not highly pressured last year. He just wasn't able to capitalize on his opportunities that he had going into the year. So I think Carson Wentz is going to be just fine behind that offensive line. You look at the running back situation, you got Antonio Gibson. Everybody loves Antonio Gibson. J.D. McKissick is back, was with the Buffalo Bills for about an hour, and then he decided to go back to the Washington Commanders. They signed Brian Robinson, a running back out of Alabama, in the 3rd round. They did bring in Sam Howell in the 5th round. which is kind of interesting here because Sam Howell was supposedly a first-round pick by some people. He was some people's number 1 quarterback in this class, which is crazy, but I think he was my number 4 going into the pre-draft. Ended up falling to the 5th round. They took him there. He could give legitimate competition to Taylor Heineke for the backup role. I don't think that Sam Howell's going to be good enough to push Carson Wentz, but you never know. So just something to watch there in all your rookie drafts. If you can get Sam Howell for like a 3rd or a 4th in a super flex league, it's pretty decent in my opinion, just because the upside is great. He could be potentially the starter for the team next year. Unlikely, being a 5th round pick, it's very, very long odds, especially with Sam Howell's skill set. I don't think he's necessarily the best quarterback for the modern NFL. He was oddly efficient in college, I'll say it that way. But yeah, we'll see what he can do this year. So he definitely will have an opportunity to compete with Taylor Heineke, who we've kind of seen through 2 years what he can do. Carson Wentz is leading this whole pack. Great stable of running backs here. Brian Robinson, it's already come out from Ron Rivera that he wants Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson to kind of be the thunder and lightning of this team, which is good. Antonio Gibson is very, very good. Don't get me wrong, but he's just been kind of banged up. He doesn't handle the workload the best. He's kind of like Ty Montgomery from a few years ago, only they're trying to keep him alive instead of Green Bay just giving him every single carry in the backfield. So, yeah, I like Brian Robinson quite a bit. He's going in the 3rd round of rookie startups right now. I think that could be a steal. If anything happened to Antonio Gibson where he faltered for any reason, Brian Robinson would definitely be able to step in with a workhorse role immediately. He's a big body back. He was top 7 on my pre-draft rankings for running backs, and then he went to a great landing spot, went in the 3rd round. Ooh, the draft capital that everybody loves to talk about. So Brian Robinson has it all going on for him. Now, I know that a lot of people are worried about J.D. McKissic kind of killing Antonio Gibson's value. I'm less concerned about J.D. McKissic. They signed him to like the bare minimum deal. Like he's making no money this year. So I'm not too concerned about him. I think that Brian Robinson actually allows them to utilize Antonio Gibson a little bit more in the passing game and kind of work J.D. McKissic back, because J.D. McKissic, first off, he's not a young guy. He's been around the league for a while. Second off, Antonio Gibson is a much better pass catcher. I don't care how many targets J.D. McKissic gets. Gibson is the better pass catcher. He was a wide receiver in college, for crying out loud. Like, what are we doing here? So, honestly, I think that Brian Robinson will give Antonio Gibson a little bit more opportunity in the passing game while limiting some of his ground game work. Now, the question will be where the touchdowns go between these two guys. It's a flip a coin situation here. I don't really know. Hopefully they go to Gibson. You know, I love Gibson, have him in quite a few teams, but, you know, I could see Brian Robinson coming in and taking a lot of the touchdown work away from him. So, yeah, it's a good situation for the running backs. All right, now you go to the tight end. You got Logan Thomas. He's been around for a while. Really not too much else for the tight end situation. So Logan Thomas is going to be the guy that you want for fantasy for this team. If he can stay healthy, he can be very good, especially with Carson Wentz, who we know loves to target the tight end position. So Logan Thomas might be a little bit of a sleeper in dynasty leagues right now. But yeah, I'm interested to see where he ultimately ends up at the end of the year. I could see him sneaking into the, I don't know, like 14 to 16 range, having some really good weeks, but I would be hesitant giving up too much for him if you can avoid it, especially with the age tied into Carson Wentz and the instability that Carson Wentz is going to have, because he's going to have bad weeks, he's going to have good weeks, and if he has enough bad weeks, he might be gone off the team. So that's the only fear for Carson Wentz this year and Logan Thomas long term. All right, now you go to the wide receivers. They got Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry. I don't care. He's not F1. No, it's never going to happen. He's not an F1 McLaurin. He's Scary Terry. He terrifies the defense. That's why he's got the name. That's the whole point of it. So they got Scary Terry McLaurin over here as their number 1 wide receiver. They've got Curtis Samuel coming back off of a hamstring injury last year that basically kept him out the entire year. They took Jahan Dotson as the number 5 wide receiver in the first round of this draft a couple weeks ago. They've got Cam Sims coming back. They've got Diami Brown coming back. Interestingly enough, Diami Brown pairs back up with Sam Howell. If Diami Brown is working the second team a little bit more with Sam Howell, and for some reason Sam Howell works his way into the starter role for the team, Diami Brown could have a very massive upsurge in targets just based on, one, the practice squad narrative. Those guys always kind of target the guys they're comfortable with, and 2, the college connection as well. So just something to keep an eye on for Diami Brown. But as of right now, I think that he is probably the number 3 guy. It all depends on if Curtis Samuel can come in and stay healthy. If Samuel does not stay healthy, I think that the way that this roster would shake out is Terry McLaurin as the X wide receiver, Diami Brown as the Z wide receiver, and then Jahan Dotson would fall into the slot role. But we'll see how the positional rankings of this shake up as we go along this offseason. So getting to the starters here, the projected starters, Terry McLaurin's still a great option. He's a free agent after this year because he was a 3rd-round pick. They don't have a 5th-year option to keep him around. They could always franchise tag him. Oh, but the Washington Commanders, man, they're an interesting organization. Their owner, Dan Snyder, might be getting kicked out of the NFL just because he was stealing a ton of money from the other owners, and it's just kind of a mess. So the front office is a nightmare for Washington. But yeah, I don't know. They're petty enough that I think that they would try and franchise tag Terry McLaurin next year, but I have no idea what they would end up doing. So I know that they don't want to lose Terry McLaurin just from a football standpoint because he's very good. He's very talented. And Carson Wentz is probably the best quarterback that he's played with so far in his NFL career. I don't think that's too much of a long stretch because he didn't even get to play with Ryan Fitzmagic last year. So Terry McLaurin might be rolling with the best quarterback he's had. And if we know one thing about Carson Wentz, he does like to throw the dangerous 50-50 ball, and Terry McLaurin is going to do that all day. So I really like Terry McLaurin. I could see him sneaking into the top 12 wide receivers this year, honestly. I think that he's probably going to be minimum of 12, minimum of 15, highest of 10 in that range is my guess if I had to put some money on it. Jahan Dotson, he's a rookie. He's going pretty late compared to the other first-round wide receivers of this draft class. He wasn't my favorite pre-draft wide receiver. The landing spot is good, don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to overly elevate him just because of the landing spot and the situation. He's still, I think, he's in my 3rd or 4th tier of wide receivers. If you want to see my tiers of the wide receivers post-draft, I did a podcast about 2 weeks ago with those rankings. So go back and listen to that and you'll see where Jahan Dotson falls. But yeah, I'm not overly excited. He's fallen to the beginning of the 2nd round though, which I think is kind of worth his value. I would probably honestly prefer Jahan Dotson over someone like Christian Watson or even Sky Moore. I think there's more road to upside for him than those players specifically. But I know that is definitely a hot take if you go on fantasy Twitter right now. And then the last guy I want to talk about here is Curtis Samuel before we move on to the New York Giants. But Curtis Samuel is an interesting player for fantasy football. Was with the Carolina Panthers, never really broke out, but he started to his last year with the Panthers. He comes over to Washington, gets injured, doesn't play at all last year, still only 25 years old. He is very interesting from a dynasty perspective because you can spend a 3rd-round pick, 4th-round pick maybe even on Curtis Samuel right now and get him for that. And he's only 25 years old. If, the injury narrative, it always derails players. It always pushes them down. Oh, this guy's injured. He's never going to come back. If Curtis Samuel comes back to how he was the last year in Carolina and can pick up from where he left off there, man, we could be getting a steal for a third round, fourth round pick. Curtis Samuel is someone very, very interesting, very great, explosive athlete. He's probably the best just pure wide receiver on this team out of all these guys, in my opinion. But Terry McLaurin is just the better alpha dog wide receiver. So just something to think about with Curtis Samuel. If you can spend a very late round pick to add Curtis Samuel, I would prefer Curtis Samuel over some of the guys that are going in the third, fourth round right now in your rookie startups. You're talking about guys like, who's the Calvin Austin, the tiny dude out of Pitt that was like a 5th round pick or something like that. Yeah, I would definitely try and get Curtis Samuel over him, and you can definitely do it for the same draft pick. I know that for a fact. So, Curtis Samuel is a little bit of a sleeper for me. He's kind of interesting and a name to watch. So that's my thoughts on the Washington Commanders. More than likely, they're probably going to finish last in this division, but I don't know. Carson Wentz, if he plays like he's capable, the defense is nasty, man. Their defense is just a nightmare. Their front four is scary. Their secondary is just out of this world. They are a quarterback away from being very good and basically in the playoffs in the NFC. So, yeah, I'm very interested to see how they finish this year, and it's all going to ride on Carson Wentz's shoulders, which I'm sure a lot of Commanders fans do not want to hear. So, that said, we're going to go on to the New York Giants. Man, I'm so thirsty. I did a workout before the podcast, and I've just been like dehydrated all week. Just crazy thirsty all week. So, all right, going into the New York Giants and what to do with the New York Giants. They have a new head coach. Brian Daboll comes over from the Buffalo Bills and brings over a new offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, yada, yada, yada. The defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale from the Ravens, is very interesting, especially with this defense. I think this is one of the most expensive defenses in the NFL right now, which is crazy. Dave Gettleman, the former GM, they also have a new GM for the team as well. Dave Gettleman, the former GM, blew out the spending basically his entire last season, just overpaid everybody to get them to come into the team, and it did not work out that well. But man alive, they have really tried to hammer a lot of the weaknesses on this team this draft. So yeah, it's quite interesting to see how it's going to go. Defense, I think, still has a few holes on it. It's not the best defense, but it is a very talented defense. I'll say that much right there. The front four, much better with the addition of Kayvon Thibodeau. Their first pick in the draft, I believe. They took him at 5, and then Evan Neal at 7, the right tackle that you can see here. They added a lot of defensive players, but they tried really, really hard to add a lot more on the offensive line as well. So, the biggest problem with the New York Giants for the last couple of years has been their offensive line and Daniel Jones. So it's really hard to say which one is the chicken or the egg in this situation. Daniel Jones has a massive turnover problem. The dude just loves to give the other team the ball. But is it because he has no protection and they've had one of the worst offensive lines in the league? It's possible. Or is he just that bad? I don't really know. I can't tell with Daniel Jones. That's why they didn't extend him for the 5th-year option. They're going to try and go all in on Daniel Jones this year, which I'm fine with. And we will finally see once and for all if he can be a good quarterback. He's very, very talented. He's just so bad at turning the ball over. Maybe you can fix that. Maybe not. I don't know. So we will find out this year. Daniel Jones, quarterback. In a super flex, he's kind of interesting just because he is extremely cheap for being a former first-round pick. I think number 6 overall in the 2019 draft class. So, the belief and the talent is there, but it's just whether or not he can put it all together. And this is year 4 for him, so it's been kind of a nightmare situation for him the last couple of years because they, again, have had one of the worst offensive lines for like his entire tenure with the Giants. They've been terrible at the offensive line. His wide receivers continuously get hurt or missed time or whatever. Saquon Barkley's been out of the league basically the entire time. He's missed like 2 seasons with injury. So there's a lot of excuses you can make for Daniel Jones. I just don't know if it's legitimate excuses or not. So that's up to you to decide. My opinion is he's probably going to get replaced next year. He's not Brian Daboll's guy. I think they're going to come in the draft. They're probably going to have another high pick, and they're going to take one of the quarterbacks in next year's draft class with a much better quarterback class. That is my personal opinion on what's going to happen. But for this year, Daniel Jones, kind of interesting for a super flex. I don't ever see them going to Tyrod Taylor. Daniel Jones would have to be so bad. He would have to be so bad. I can't even imagine how bad he would have to be to get Tyrod Taylor on the field. Just based on every endorsement that the coaching staff has given Daniel Jones, the owner has given Daniel Jones. The owner came out and said that they haven't done a good job trying to make Daniel Jones good. So when the owner says that, you're basically guaranteed 17 games of Daniel Jones as long as he can stay healthy. So pure athlete, kind of good, kind of sneaky for Superflex. If you need a cheap starter, 1-year rental for a quarterback, Daniel Jones could be your guy. So that's quarterback. Running back, we got Saquon Barkley coming back here. We've got Matt Breida behind him, and that's about it. There's really nobody else here in the running back room that really matters. The biggest question is, what Saquon Barkley are we going to get? And everyone remembers how Barkley came in last year at the end of the year and how he wasn't that efficient. He wasn't that good. But, man, exhausted. Sorry about that. But, yeah, Saquon Barkley, I think that we're going to see a new version of Saquon Barkley. If you remember, he tore his ACL in the end of the 2020 season. And I know everyone expects these guys to just come back and be perfect as soon as they're healthy, right? They're going to be back to 100%, explosiveness, yada, yada. Saquon Barkley was slow. He was sluggish. He didn't look like the old Saquon Barkley last year. Maybe that ACL was lingering a little bit more than people anticipated, right? I think the rumors in last year's offseason were he was going to be on the PUP at the start of the season, meaning he was going to miss 6 games at the start of last year, and he didn't. He came out game 1, started playing, wasn't that good. I think he got banged up again last year for a few games. And yeah, the biggest issue with Saquon Barkley is just health. So if he can stay healthy, and I think that he's fully recovered from the ACL, we can see his explosion coming back this year. Barkley with this new revamped offensive line that's going to be taking steps forward. I don't hate it. I think that Saquon Barkley is going to be a RB1. I think that we're going to see a massive resurgence on his career, and he's going to be a free agent after this year. So, yeah, I do like that quite a bit. He is a definite buy for me right now in Dynasty if you can get him. The people that own him still kind of believe in the original 101 of 2018 draft, Saquon Barkley, the generational prospect that he was. But a lot of people have soured on him, and if you can buy him in your league for cheap, I'm all in on that. So that's my thoughts on Barkley. Going into the tight end, I don't care. I'm not rostering any of these tight ends. Feel free. Ricky Seals-Jones, unrestricted free agent, came over from Washington. He's basically a journeyman at this point in his career. He was with the Cardinals. I could not care less. If you look at Brian Daboll's system with Buffalo, doesn't really rely on the tight end very much. Not a very talented tight end. Bada bing, bada boom, I'm out. Wide receivers, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Now, Brian Daboll had Josh Allen over in Buffalo. Very, very talented athlete of a quarterback, better decision maker than Daniel Jones, but Daniel Jones is an athlete, and they love to gimmick open these wide receivers. And this is why I think that Kenny Golladay is a massive steal in Dynasty Leagues right now. Out of all these guys, Kadarius Toney, not favorable with the coaching staff right now. Sterling Shepard is just never going to be a thing. He's good, but he's not great, right? He's just never going to be a thing. They drafted Wayndale Robinson in the second round of this last year's draft. Darius Slayton's still there, but these guys are not amazing talents. The best wide receiver on this entire team right now is Kenny Golladay. Kadarius Toney might become the best wide receiver if he can get his head in the game. You know what I mean? Like, he's got a lot of issues, off the field issues. He just doesn't seem like he wants to be there very much, in my personal opinion. I could be wrong. I don't know his heart. I don't know what's going through his head. But the signs that he gives off are he just does not care, which is fine. Maybe he doesn't want to be there. Maybe he'll go to another team in 3 years and it'll be great. But as of right now, Kadarius Toney has all the talent in the world to be the best wide receiver. We saw in one game last year. You can't, if you're not talented, you can't put up 10 catches for 200 yards against a fairly decent defense. I forget who it was against. I think it was like, it wasn't the Rams. Maybe it was like the Chargers or something like that. But, I mean, 10 catches for 200 yards. That's really freaking good, man. But the fact that the current coaching staff doesn't like Kadarius Toney already is not a good sign. It's not good at all. Sterling Shepard was injured last year, coming off of injury. I'm really not interested in rostering Sterling Shepard from a fantasy perspective. I just don't know if he'll ever contribute enough to be relevant. Kadarius Toney is worth taking a stab on if you think that he's going to outperform his off-the-field shenanigans. But, yeah, I think that Kenny Golladay is, again, by and far the best wide receiver. I understand that they paid him a lot of money last year and it didn't work out. The whole team was a shit show. They kneeled the ball. They did a QB sneak kneel on 3rd and 10 on their own 5-yard line. Like, why are we acting like the Giants were not trying to just tank last year? Why are we acting like that? But, all of a sudden, Kenny Golladay is a problem. He's just so bad now. He's so bad. The Giants were tanking for 15 games last year. But no, let's continue to say that the players are bad. I never understand these narratives. If the whole team sucks, why is it one player's fault? Why is it Kenny Galladay's fault? I'll never understand this. So I'm buying Kenny Golladay everywhere. Well, I basically owned Kenny Golladay, and maybe I'm biased. Maybe I am, but I've got the rose-colored glasses on. But I think that if you look at these names, Wan'Dale Robinson is kind of interesting. He might be something down the road, but he's a rookie. I mean, he's a second-round pick, rookie wide receiver, kind of a reach. Nobody really expected Wan'Dale Robinson to go that high. But, yeah, I just think that Kenny Golladay is going to have a lot of opportunity. He's going to be Brian Daboll's favorite guy to go to, and they're going to try and get him the ball as much as physically possible next year. So buy while you can and don't be disappointed. That's my opinion. All right, going into the Dallas Cowboys. Them boys are back, you know what I mean? They're yeah, I don't like the Cowboys that much, to be honest with you, but I know a lot of people do. So if you're looking for fantasy options, though, the Dallas Cowboys are loaded. That is definitely for sure. Now, there's not too many changes. They are definitely trying to get a healthy offensive line back, finally. But, yeah, it's going to be interesting. So they brought back Tyler Biadasz. They've got Zach Martin. They've got Terrence Steele. They've got Tyron Smith coming back. Most of those guys have missed multiple games due to injury over the last couple of years, like many games due to injury. They don't really have the best depth behind those guys. They've got some interesting depth, but not great depth. Yeah, I think the offensive line, this whole offense hinges on the offensive line. We've seen it many times through Dak's career. If his offensive line falls apart, so does Dak. At times, Dak also just seems to fall apart, but yeah, it's hard to explain why. So quarterback, we got Dak Prescott. I still like Dak Prescott quite a bit. I really think that he's a very good quarterback. I don't really understand how he can just mentally fall off a cliff at times. Really, I don't understand. And I know that in 2021, Dak experienced a massive leg injury, 2020, he experienced a nasty bone break on his ankle. I think it was his right ankle, his plant leg. But last year was his first year back. He looked pretty good. He was healthy finally. But he definitely seemed like he was afraid to utilize his full skill set. And maybe, again, I know that a lot of the times people just expect these injuries. Oh, you're healthy. But there's a mental aspect to it too, you know. as someone who had herniated a disc when I was lifting earlier in my life, right, a couple years ago, I went many years without getting that disc fixed, right? When I finally got it fixed, the x-rays all said, oh, it is healed. It's fully healed. But in my brain, I did not want to go back to doing the exercises that I did that caused the injury, right? Or if I did those, I did not put nearly as much weight on. It was squats that did it, and I just didn't want to overload the squats. So, there's a mental aspect that these guys have to work through. He played a whole season last year. I think that he's slowly working back to 100%. And I think that because of that, Dak Prescott is primed in 2022 to have a comeback season of sorts, kind of like a Joe Burrow-esque comeback this year. He's got all the talent in the world, but again, last year he played limited for whatever reason. And I think it was the ankle injury kind of scared him a little bit, so it threw off a lot of his other mechanics, and it just was kind of a mess. And I think that he's going to get it right, and he'll be back this year. So Dak Prescott in Dynasty is like my number 7 overall quarterback. I still love the talent quite a bit, and I think that he's still a steal for Dynasty. Young enough, talented enough, and he just needs to get a little bit of that mobility back, and I think that the Cowboys are going to be a nightmare on offense. Running back wise, we got Zeke Elliott and Tony Pollard. Nobody else really matters on this team. Tony Pollard is probably the RB1 based on how it looked last year. But joking aside, Zeke Elliott is still there. He was very good last year, and then he seemingly got injured at some point. He had a knee, I think an MCL injury, played through it, showed the toughness, but he was not nearly as good, and Tony Pollard showed how good he could be during that same stretch. So for fantasy purposes, it's crazy the fall off that Zeke has had. He was like RB4 2 years ago. I think last year he was like RB6 in startups. So what do you do with Zeke Elliott? I think he finishes, if he can stay healthy, we'll put it this way. If he can stay healthy, he's an RB1 for sure. Locked and loaded RB1. I don't know if he can stay healthy. It's a little bit of a risk. Tony Pollard has also shown enough that he can maybe steal a little bit more of the work. They don't have to lean on Zeke Elliott. And if you look at Mike McCarthy's history with running backs, he never gives the full workload to one guy. Jerry Jones might kind of dictate that a little bit more for the Cowboys, that they want to feed Zeke, but he has never been a bell cow guy in his tenure as a head coach. So I think that this year that we're going to see Zeke Elliott probably in the 12 to 15 range. I think he's going to be a solid RB2. I think Tony Pollard is going to finish right behind him in the 15 to 18 range. These guys are both going to be top 20 running backs, but I think Zeke's going to finish higher than Pollard, and it's all about, like I said, I think Zeke's probably going to miss a few games, but if he can stay healthy the whole season, I think that he's going to be an RB1. He'll probably be 7 to 10 in that range, in my opinion, but we will see. Now, pass catchers. This is where it gets even more interesting, right? So Dak, great quarterback. We've already been over this. Good rushing upside, which was kind of nice. Didn't really have it last year, but he was feeding the hell out of his wide receivers and his pass catchers last year. Dalton Schultz, they re-signed him to an extension or a new contract, and yeah, I really like him. They let, I forget the other guy's name, Blake Jarwin. They let Blake Jarwin walk this offseason, and they kept Dalton Schultz. And Blake Jarwin was talked about for years as being the better pass catcher, but it didn't matter. Dalton Schultz was the guy that Dak would go to in a pinch, and that's just how it was. And Dalton Schultz and Dak Prescott have a very good symbiotic relationship, kind of like the old Jason Witten role that he played with Dak when he was still on the team. I think that Dak Prescott likes to target the tight end position when he's getting rushed or when he's getting pressured, and I think Dalton Schultz is going to be a steal in drafts yet again, because he's going to be underrated yet again, because he's not the best athlete in the entire NFL at the tight end position, but it doesn't matter when you have that synergy with your quarterback. So Dalton Schultz, really love him in Dynasty. Now you look at the wide receivers over here. We got CeeDee Lamb, stud. He's my RB or wide receiver 4 right now in Dynasty, which it's tough to not put him at 3 right now above A.J. Brown. I love A.J. Brown that much. I still have him at 3, but CeeDee Lamb, if he has a good year this year, he will definitely vault up to the top 3, the Chase and Jefferson tier of wide receivers. And we will see how he does this year because they got rid of Amari Cooper. They traded him to Cleveland for a 5th-round pick just to get rid of the contract, save themselves some money. So there's that. Michael Gallup tore his ACL in the playoffs of last year, so he's not going to be healthy to start the season. They brought in James Washington. Very interesting, sneaky, low, below the radar signing right there. I think that James Washington's going to be a very good addition. I think that he's going to have a role for fantasy. We will see if we can finally see what James Washington is capable of. And I know, we didn't do it with Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh creates wide receivers, but we've seen situations where wide receivers leave Pittsburgh and they go on to be good. So I think that James Washington, if you remember, he was like, was he a 1st-round pick? I can't remember if he was a 1st or 2nd-round pick. I think he might have been a 2nd, but he was universally talked about as one of the top wide receivers in the 2018 draft class, or 2018 draft class, same as Michael Gallup. But the fact that Pittsburgh just never really utilized him, and I don't think it's a coincidence that James Washington plays a deep route, and it was with multiple years of Ben Roethlisberger with no deep ball, like his arm was shot. So we'll see what he can do with someone whose arm is not shot. I'm very excited for James Washington this year. Again, super cheap option, Curtis Samuel type of player. If you can get him for a late pick, I'd rather have him than Calvin Austin, the wide receiver out of Pitt, who's 5'9", 180 pounds. Like, I'm good. I'd rather have James Washington. He's a thick boy. He's built for the wide receiver, and he's got a lot of opportunity ahead of him right now with Michael Gallup still recovering at the start of the year. So James Washington, again, same as Curtis Samuel, if you can spend a late round pick on him and snag him just to see what happens at the start of the year, it could pay off in a massive way. CeeDee Lamb, again, I think that he'll be the wide receiver 3 or 4 after this season. Right now, he's number 4. Could see him vault up. Very much interesting. I'm very interested to see how CeeDee Lamb does with all the opportunity that he's going to have. The biggest problem with Lamb has been that they don't really target him, or they throw him just bad. Like, it's not good passes that he's getting. I know he's getting like, he had 13 targets in this game, but it's like 4 of them were catchable. Like, what are we doing here? Like, most of them were just throwaways or whatever. So we'll see if they can target him and make him the focal point of the offense. Now, Cowboys fans get really mad at me because Kellen Moore, a lot of them like Kellen Moore, but Kellen Moore, I just don't get it. I'm not a fan of Kellen Moore. I think he's a terrible offensive coordinator. Don't really like Mike McCarthy as a head coach. So the coaching staff, I think that's the biggest detriment to CeeDee Lamb having a breakout season this year is Kellen Moore is a terrible offensive coordinator, like a bad offensive coordinator. But Cowboys fans love to say that he's good. So, prove it now. You got all the opportunity in the world. Prove it. And then the last guy I want to talk about here is just Jalen Tolbert, third round wide receiver they took in this year's draft class. Very interesting. He has, again, a lot of opportunity with Michael Gallup still recovering. I think they signed Michael Gallup to an extension this year, so he's not going anywhere. So it's going to be Michael Gallup and CeeDee Lamb as the centerpiece of this offense for a few years to come. But Jalen Tolbert will have to beat out James Washington. I don't think he's going to do that as a rookie, but with Michael Gallup injured, he'll have playing time at the start of the year. So we'll see what he can do. I don't think that there's going to be a ton of opportunity. Again, I think they're going to scheme up CeeDee Lamb, really try and utilize Tony Pollard and Zeke Elliott in the running game, and then Dalton Schultz is going to be the emergency shutoff valve for the team. So that is the Dallas Cowboys, and I think I'm running a little bit behind what I wanted to do, so I'm going to try and go a little bit quicker through the Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah, we're at 40 minutes right now, so I'm trying to pick this up a little bit quicker for the Eagles. Now, no coaching changes. really not much of an offseason that was very impactful whatsoever. The biggest thing they did was they got Jordan Davis as their first pick in the draft. They traded up. I did predict them to jump the Ravens in the draft. I had it for the wrong player, but I did predict them to jump the Ravens. I predicted the pick, just wrong player. Proud of myself. Small clap on the back because I had a terrible draft prediction sheet if you looked at it after the draft. But yeah, they jumped up ahead of the Baltimore Ravens to take Jordan Davis, defensive lineman. And then they used their second first-round pick on A.J. Brown. So they brought in A.J. Brown, the wide receiver from Tennessee, and paid him a lot of money. I think it's like 4 years, $200 million or $100 million? $100 million. That's what it was, not $200 million. That would be a lot for a wide receiver, $50 million a year. But yeah, they paid him $100 million with like 55 of it guaranteed, whatever. It's a very good contract for A.J. Brown. It's not top of the market cash. It's probably too much for your wide receivers nowadays, but that contract money is just going up and up and up. But the biggest thing they did not do is bring in a quarterback. So they are rolling with Jalen Hurts. They still have an amazing offensive line. Their offensive line last year was one of the best in the league, and they made no changes. And it's just getting a little bit healthier, a little bit better, and it's going to be great to see what they can do this year. So Jalen Hurts is the quarterback. He has one more year to prove it before they can potentially replace him with a quarterback in next year's draft class. I think Jalen Hurts is going to prove it this year. If you remember, he has basically a season and a half worth of experience under his belt at this point, and he's shown enough. They were good enough to get to the playoffs last year. They do it again, they're not moving on from Jalen Hurts. They're just going to continue to build around this guy and make him the focal point of this offense. Now, Jalen Hurts for fantasy, it all depends on what you think of him. If you think he's good enough to secure the job long term, he's worth whatever the payment is in a super flex one quarterback because of the rushing upside that he has. But if you don't think he's good enough, well, you don't invest because the price is going to be too high. What you're going to have to give up for Jalen Hurts because of that rushing upside is not worth it if you think that they're going to replace him next year. And Jalen Hurts, if he becomes a free agent, there's no way he doesn't get drafted by another or signed by another team. But yeah, I am a big Jalen Hurts fan. I'm still mad that the Patriots didn't get him in 2020. I know we got Mac Jones, and I like Mac Jones, but it's just so tough seeing what Jalen Hurts can do, that rushing upside. Oh, it'd be so good. And it's like perfect for what Bill Belichick wants to do. They just want to run the ball. Whatever. So Jalen Hurts, as a quarterback, great addition. Gardner Minshew as his backup is fine. I'm not really spending too much on Gardner Minshew for fantasy, so there's that. Running back wise, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Didn't bring anybody in. They brought in a free agent. They restricted free agent. After the draft, they signed this guy to the roster. Doesn't really matter. Don't care about him. They still got Boston Scott. They've got Kenneth Gainwell, and they've got Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders is someone that is very interesting for fantasy. Last year, he had no touchdowns, played a little banged up here and there, and that's kind of his MO at this point. He's not going to play a full 17 games, but Miles Sanders had no touchdowns last year. I don't think that's going to continue. So going into this season, Miles Sanders is like RB 27 on a lot of the boards right now. I think that's a steal. You're definitely going to get better production than an RB3 from Miles Sanders in this team. So Miles Sanders is someone that I'm very interested in. The question is, are they going to keep him after this year? Because he is a free agent after this season, being a second-round pick. I think they're going to let him walk, and that's where Kenneth Gainwell gets a little bit more interesting because they're going to need someone to step up. Kenneth Gainwell showed quite a bit of production last year when given the opportunity, and with a little bit more time under his belt, he's a 5th-round pick, so, draft capital, he's never, ever going to be worth anything ever in fantasy because no 5th-round pick has ever been good statistically. It's just never, ever happened. But, he has the opportunity next year. So from a dynasty perspective, I'm kind of interested in Kenneth Gainwell quite a bit because especially if something happens to Miles Sanders, which is a high likelihood at this point in his career, he's shown that he can't really play the full season. I don't think they're going to go with Boston Scott as the primary replacement for Miles Sanders. I think that Kenny Gainwell is going to earn enough in that role. So that's my thoughts on the running back. If you can get Miles Sanders for cheap, I'm all in for that. So let me know what you guys think Miles Sanders is worth in terms of startup picks. I'm trying to get him in one league, and I'm just kind of curious to see what the consensus would say. And just, let me know down below in a comment if you're watching this on YouTube, and we'll see what you guys say. Now, tight end, we've got Dallas Goedert, really the only one that matters for fantasy. JJ Arcega-Whiteside has transitioned to tight end from wide receiver. Kind of funny. Don't think it matters. But Dallas Goedert was very good last year with Jalen Hurts, but he was kind of just inconsistent. And that was kind of the biggest problem with Dallas Goedert. But we saw as the season went on, Jalen Hurts got more comfortable with the passing game. Like it's something that he's been working on developing. And I think that he's going to take a big step forward in the passing game this year because a lot of the start of last year was him relying on his legs. They weren't really able to move the ball through the air. Dallas Goedert would get a couple bomb plays or, like goal line targets, and that's how he would make his week. But a lot of it was Jalen Hurts' legs. As the season went on, the passing game became just a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. So Dallas Goedert right now for me is probably my tight end 7 in Dynasty right now, which the gap between him and like 5, who would be 5? Probably, Hawkinson or Goddard. Which one would you rather have? Or Freiermuth or Goddard? There's a lot of those young potential guys right there, right after 5. So 6 and 7, it's those kind of players. I think that there's a very definite upside of a tight end 1 this year, and I think that he could make a step forward. Again, it takes tight ends a little bit. The year 3 breakout for Dallas Goedert was real. Last year was year 3. We saw the breakout, and after they break out, they tend to continuously go up and up the mountain. So I think that Dallas Goedert is going to be very good for fantasy this year and is going to be a very good investment in your leagues if you need a tight end. Now, wide receiver-wise, again, they traded for A.J. Brown. They have Devonta Smith still. They signed Zach Pascal from Indianapolis. They have Jalen Reagor still, Greg Ward, Quez Watkins. Jalen Reagor is the interesting one here that I want to touch on first. First-round pick in 2020. People hated it, blah, blah, blah. Just easy to bag on Jalen Reagor. I just took him in a startup league in the 23rd round, and people were like, oh, why'd you take Jalen Reagor so bad? He's a first-round pick going into his 3rd year. Again, I talk about this all the time. Just because they haven't done it through 2 years doesn't mean they're going to bust. Like, maybe he needs to learn. Maybe he needs an extra year. It used to be 3 years was the minimum for wide receivers to break out. If they didn't break out after 3 years, that's when you were concerned. This is year 3 for Jalen Reagor. So first off, right there, let's see what he can do in year 3 before we write him off. Second off, I don't think he's going to be on the team. I think that Green Bay is going to trade for him. I think that one of these other wide receiver needy teams is going to trade for him. And I know, everybody filled their wide receiver needs in the draft. Not really. There's still some teams out there that still need a wide receiver. Basically, like, look at the Colts. They could still definitely use another wide receiver. I know they got Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman, but that's about it. So, yeah, I think Jalen Reagor is a definite trade candidate from the team going into the season. So we'll see what happens there. But again, it's year 3. Why are we writing these guys off so early? Let's give him a chance to bust. He was very good. He had a very good skill set coming out. I just don't understand why we want to write him off already. So that's my thoughts on Jalen Reagor. You can get him for cheap. You can get him for free almost. Like I said, 24th or 25th round in a startup league for Jalen Reagor. That's free money, man. Like, what if he hits? I don't think, and by hit, I mean like wide receiver 2. I don't think he's going to be a top 10 wide receiver anytime soon. Let's say he's a wide receiver 2 in the 25th round. Come on. It's easy. It's like a 200. That's a top 300 player. Oh, goodness. All right, now the main attraction here is Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown, for me, still the wide receiver 3 for Dynasty. Does have a little bit of a tougher challenge here. I know that Jalen Hurts was improving through the air at the end of last season, but he's not the greatest through the air. I would say that Ryan Tannehill is probably a better passer than Jalen Hurts at this point in both of their careers. But again, I think Jalen Hurts is going to make a step forward, and I think that that's going to be just fine for A.J. Brown. Also, A.J. Brown's MO is not really the, I'm going to run a route and just, cook you down the field. He's like, I'm just going to get this ball and just break 5 tackles and score a touchdown out of nowhere, like literally out of nowhere. So A.J. Brown is a better fit for Jalen Hurts, even if he doesn't take a step forward. So that's my thoughts on A.J. Brown. Really love the talent still. Still have him top 3 wide receiver, but potentially could fall to 4 if CeeDee Lamb does take a step forward this year. Devonta Smith, I was never high on. I know that this was a controversial take last year. Devonta Smith wasn't that good. The problem with Devonta Smith is he was open a lot. He really was. Like, that is the best part of his game. He is one of the slickest route runners in the NFL. As a rookie last year, he was very, very slick. You need a quarterback that can make use of that, and I don't think that's ever going to be Jalen Hurts. Even if Jalen Hurts takes a step forward in the passing game, he is never going to be a guy that really utilizes and makes use of the open wide receiver route running kind of guys. He doesn't throw with anticipation, really. He throws the guys open that he sees open. You know what I mean? Like, he just throws it to the guys he sees open. So, yeah, I think that that's the biggest problem with Devonta Smith. I think that in Dynasty, I would be investing in Devonta Smith for his next contract, or if you don't believe in Jalen Hurts. That's the only reason I would be investing in Devonta Smith right now. From a fantasy perspective, I just don't think he's ever going to be worth the cost. I think he's going to have a disappointing year again this year for fantasy purposes only. And I think that he's going to drive down in value again after the year. So if you want him, go get him next year. That's my opinion there. So that is the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, they made a lot of improvements on the defensive side of the ball, trying to really build up that front 7 depth. Like, they have so much depth on this defense. It's crazy how deep this defense is. But yeah, I'm interested to see what the Eagles can do. I think that they're going to win this division this year. And it's the long-running curse of the NFC East. Did the Cowboys finally break the curse and win 2 years in a row? But for the longest time, it was a new champion of the league basically every single year. So I think it's the Eagles' year this year. I was encouraged by what I saw last year. But yeah, we will see once football starts. So again, draft wasn't a major impact on the team, but trading for A.J. Brown was huge. I think that he's a perfect fit for Jalen Hurts. I think that he's going to be the number 1 on this team by a mile. I think that he's still going to be top 5 in fantasy. And I know, he hasn't finished top 5. It doesn't matter. I don't care. He's going to finish top 10. If he stays healthy, he's going to finish top 10. That's just how it's going to be. So he's explosive enough. He's good enough. Yeah, I love the talent of A.J. Brown. So that is my thoughts there. Now, this has been my NFC East breakdown. Please, like I said, I hate doing the plugging. I really do. It's just not in my nature. I need a co-host. So that I can have them plug everything, because it just feels so self-centered. I hate it. But please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube, if you're on Spotify, anything like that. Please be sure to follow the podcast so you can get it. I'm still going to be continuing to crank out 2 to 3 episodes a week. Again, I talked about this on Tuesday, but I want to get some guest podcasts going here in the next couple of weeks. I think I have everything set up now. I just have to actually get a guest on to do the final preparation for it. So again, let me know if there's any guests you're interested in seeing, and I'd love to reach out to them and try and get them on the podcast. I have a few people in mind, so I'm going to start reaching out to them here this weekend and trying to coordinate for next Friday. But the goal is Sunday night, recording a podcast, we're going to be going through the AFC South on Sunday night. Oh, great. God, the Colts. God. Oh, it's going to be painful. Jaguars. Oh, man. That's got to be one of the most devoid of talent like divisions in the NFL. But yeah, we're going through the AFC South on Sunday night. Next Tuesday. We're going through the NFC South. Talk about a loaded division right there. And then Friday, I want to get a guest on. So that is my goal for the next week, the coming week. But yeah, thank you guys again so much for listening. I appreciate you guys, and have a good night.